Okay, so let's start at the beginning, I guess. So, how many people here know what the Masterson method is? So, okay, so I don't have to go over all the beginning stuff. So, when we work with the horse doing body work using this method, we're using the horse's nervous system to release tension. And I just recognized that early on, not knowing anything about nervous systems. I just realized that the way that we do it, if you stay underneath the horse's bracing response, meaning their survival blocking response, if you can stay underneath that, you can get the horse to release tension on its own. Just by, when we do the bladder meridian, for example, technique, we're running our hand lightly with no pressure at all, sometimes even away from the skin, or just touching the hair. But we go down this line, down the top line, and we watch for a subtle response like a blink or a lip twitch or any change in behavior that correlates with what you're doing as a response. So we're looking for these subtle changes in behavior, and if we come across one, if we just stop and do nothing and wait and give the horse's body a chance, it will start to release tension there. And what's happening is when you're running your hand lightly down, you're finding the horse all of a sudden feels something that he's been blocking out, because they survive by blocking out pain and tension. And we're finding it because we're not putting any pressure on them. They have nothing to brace against. And if we stay there long enough, their nervous system will start to release that tension. When I first saw Dr. Peters' book, Evidence-Based Horsemanship, and read it, I saw that there was a similarity there. Even though they're talking about training, the same principles were involved. We're working with the horse's parasympathetic nervous system. We're staying below the sympathetic, the survival response. So I was kind of excited when Mark said that we were going to do this together. And then with Mark's training, it's a similar thing too. He's doing the same thing in his training. He's staying underneath the horse's sympathetic response, which is bracing. Fight, flight, freeze. But he's bracing. When we're working with the horse, they don't have the option of fleeing, so they brace. Unless you're really not paying attention, in which case they fight. Well, I'm going to demonstrate the bladder meridian, but I'm going to start right here, behind the ear, and slow. Now right away you can see he's saying that he's uncomfortable there. We're going to start behind the pole, because I know he's already got tension in his pole. And slowly come down here. Just the speed so you can see what's going on. Now we got a little bit blink right in here. I'm going to search for it again. Right there. See that? He just moved his eyelash the first time, but I went back and found it. So if I stay there and do nothing and put no pressure on it long enough, I'm not giving his sympathy, in terms of sympathetic and parasympathetic, I'm not giving his sympathetic nervous system a chance to kick in. He can't brace against nothing. So if I just keep his attention on that long enough, he'll start to release it. And when he releases it, he'll give me some other signs, like licking and chewing, yawning. If he feels tingling in his pole, he might shake his head. He'll give me some sign that he's released tension. So the hard part for humans in this process of search for a response, stay until you get a release, the hard part for us is the waiting part, do nothing. So, we feel like, well, if we got to push it or rub it, or if air gap, no pressure isn't working, maybe I should put more. Well, the opposite's the truth. You should put less. It's a little counterintuitive. But if you stay long enough, light enough here, then the horse has to release the tension. So the only thing is, can you outlast the horse? Now, fidgeting means something's about to happen. And I call it the fidget. Just before they start to let go.
He's trying to find it. He's trying to find it. He wants that homeostasis. He wants that spot.
It's a new homeostasis. His old one has just been blocking it out, compensating, and all of a sudden there's a new one. And when you had that balance of the sympathetic and parasympathetic, the two teeter-totters.
And you got to trust it. He has to trust that new homeostasis.
Yeah, so you got to, he won't trust it if you're pushing on it. So, but it's a new place of balance, the new homeostasis. And so
because really that brace is self-preservation. I need to protect myself. Am I safe? I don't know.
That's what and they'll look around here, but bring their nose around, because they're asking you, friend or foe. Like all of a sudden when you're doing this back here, they'll bring their nose around. If you put your hand up and touch their nose with your nose here, and they'll take a deep breath and they'll go, because they just realized it was safe. So, all right. So, does that make sense so far to everybody? There we go. See, he's releasing tension on his own. He feels tingling in his pole so he's doing it on his own, which is pretty cool. My arm got a little tired, but I'm not going to complain. I didn't have to do that much. So that's how it works. We're keeping the horse's awareness on a place where he's feeling something that he's been blocking out. We're keeping his awareness on it in a way that he can't brace against it, because we're not putting any pressure until his nervous system starts to release it. So that's how powerful the parasympathetic nervous system is. It's rest and digest and regenerate and heal. It's all of those things. So when the horse releases tension, every once in a while we want to step back and let him feel it, see what he has to say. And after they've released tension, they'll twitch, they'll blink, and their head will drop. Dr. Peters was talking about this morning, the head will drop and they'll twitch and blink. I guess it's the dopamine release, in the learning process, the dopamine release, that's the reward. And so the same thing happens with this. They're releasing something in their system that feels good, and if we step back and give them a chance to, I call it process it, but now I'm learning it could be the serotonin phase of the process. So I just call it, so it's process because it's easier. Serotonin was a big word, I didn't know it. So if I step back, and as long as he's twitching and blinking, he's processing it. So the longer I let him feel the release, the longer it will last. And then later when I started working on horses, I started adding in movement. And I learned that when you move a joint or a junction or a muscle through a range of motion in a relaxed state, the horse will release the tension in the connective tissue around it. I'm going to do a head lift, chin lift, and I'm going to take the weight of his head off of his pole by holding the weight of his head under his chin. Okay, bud, come here. It's not as bad as it sounds. Okay, put my hand here and wait till it gets heavy. I'm going to take a gentle lift, take the weight of his head off of his pole. Right there, till he blinks. I'm going to lift till he either blinks or he tenses. I'm going to stop before he tenses, but I'm just taking the weight of his head off of his pole. Right there, that's too much. And soften, okay? I'm going to come around. He's really, really bracy in his pole, and I'm guessing much worse on the right. Get a little wiggle here. A little wiggle here. A little wiggle here. Okay, good. Let him feel that.
And what do you think would happen if you didn't allow that gap?
I'd have a lot less result. It wouldn't hold, you know. Right. I'll get the movement, but the horse's nervous system doesn't know that it's working now. It's the horse's nervous system, the way I'm looking at it, is still in survival mode.
And serotonin helps form those associations, so that the horse starts to associate that with, and then you walk into the barn and it's associated you, like you said.
Yeah.
With that.
So that makes sense to me, the serotonin part where they're processing.
Yeah.
The nervous system it's getting it. That it moves now. This is the uncomfortable side, so I'm going to rest my finger very lightly here, behind the halter here, right on the atlas, no pushing. I'm just focusing the wiggle here. You get a very tiny wiggle. And then soften before he braces. Slide my hand down. Bring him around so he's bending at the second vertebra. Give a very tiny wiggle. Soften. Now I can let go and let him feel it here, or I can keep going. If he can handle it, I'll keep going. And slide on down, soften. And I might be able to find where in his neck he's I don't like to use words stuck, but maybe he's stuck. He could just have he could have damage there from a past injury. See, he's not bending at all, he's moving his rump away. When I get right down around 2 or 3, he stops bending and he moves his rump away. So I don't want to force it, I just want to ask him to release some tension in it. Oh, bud.
They're not going to get the same dopamine hit if it's manual and they're not involved. If they're not playing a role in it, dopamine is searching and finding the answer. That's where we're going to get our dopamine hit. So if you're just all manipulating and not allowing them to help them to find the spot, then you're not going to get the same dopamine release. And if it's unnerving to the horse, you're not going to get the serotonin. But you may well get endorphins as a result of stress from that. Yeah. You know, he's trying to find that space of homeostasis to stay in that parasympathetic nervous system. And what we've done a couple of times is you know, he won't trust it, or he'll feel something, maybe pain in his neck, I don't know, that would get him back up there. But when he lets himself go, and it takes a little of this wavering back and forth, that's when he gets those opioids. And just like a human with opioids, you'll get that sleepy, kind of drowsy, nodding off kind of look. But the key to it is he works the switch. I mean, you interrupt the nervous system and send messages, but he's working that switch. You're helping him.
In response to the input I'm giving him.
Yeah.
Okay. So I got to wait for him to work the switch. I can't do the switch. All I can do is bring his attention.
You can send messages and create situations in him but that's his response to the stress. He's doing that with his brain. But you're helping him get there.
Well, that's why I say we're not doing it to the horse, we're doing it with the horse.
Yeah.
And you have to throw away the clock. You can't anticipate, okay, it's been 3 minutes, you got to wait for the horse's
If you
body.
think you run the switch, then you lose it. And you can't be as effective. But if you realize that he runs the switch, and watch him, how far does he turn that faucet on?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what makes sense to me, because we're just bringing his attention to something, and his body's got to release it. And when I hit that part of his neck where he's bending, where he feels the discomfort, he tenses. You have to yield and go back. You don't have to let go, you just have to soften so he can let that go, and then you can move through it. Now, if there's injury in his neck, not meaning like, broken stuff, but just where scar tissue or ligaments are damaged, then you may not get through that spot. That might be it. Yeah, then you stop and then move on somewhere else. Sometimes you'll come back the next day and he will have, if it isn't damaged, he will have released it. Same as you're describing in the learning. You might think, well, we couldn't get through here today. So you stop, you don't keep trying, and you come back the next day and all of a sudden the horse bends through there because his nervous system has had time to process it. So those are the similarities that I thought were pretty cool between what Dr. Peters does and what Mark does and what we do.